Hello? Somebody hear me? Can you hear me? Hello?
Hello.
Can you hear me?
I think so. I can.
Okay, good.
Can you
Good,
hear
good,
me?
good. How are you?
I'm fine. What's going on?
Everybody is well. Everybody's doing okay. Let me just fix my microphone here so that, or move this down. Okay, that's good. I guess I'm getting shorter. Okay.
They say you shrink when you get older.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah, but you're tall. I don't have far to go.
I'm not, as I said, I feel like I'm shrinking a little bit, but that's okay. As long as I have all my other health, I'm fine, right? So you getting out?
Me, yes. I go out every day. I go to Minion every morning.
Good, good. Good. One of these days I'll get back there. I'm just, I got to get my act together.
I get
they
picked up
say.
every day. Elaine Steinberg picks me up every morning. If
Good.
not, Joel Berkowitz does.
Good. Susan, hi.
Hi.
How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Sherry will, I'll cue Sherry and she'll put up photos. I think it'd be easier that way.
Hi, Jerry.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, yes, yes.
You're there.
Okay.
I'm there.
I got back in time. Yes.
Oh, okay.
yes.
Okay, now let me
Okay.
ask you, do you hear me well or should I use the headphones with the mic?
I hear you well.
I hear you.
mean,
Okay,
Fine.
then good.
I guess as long as you keep that volume up.
Oh, I could talk. And they'll hear me in Manhattan.
All right. That's good. Okay. So what we're going to do is at the end, Miriam Feldman reminded me that beginning tonight and tomorrow is a Yom HaZikaron
Mhm.
for the
Mhm.
fallen soldiers. And then Thursday, I know, is Yom HaAtzmaut. So in addition to saying the blessing for the month of Iyar, she's going to read a poem, which she said is one that is used in Israel to commemorate
Nice.
and to read Hatikva. So yeah, so we'll do that at the end. Yeah, and I think that'll tie in also to some of
Yes.
the work you have with Ruth Gruber.
Yeah, I think it definitely will.
Yeah.
And
How are you doing, Edna?
I'm okay.
how are you?
Yeah,
What you eating there, Edna? Looks good.
Well, it's
I'm just gonna step away for 1 minute. I'll be right back.
my
So
birds
Sus-
got my birds got as soon as Passover ended, my birds got everything.
The
I
matzo meal
can't-
went out.
I can't wait.
Susan, am I going to be showing the pictures or no?
Yeah, yes, I'll ask you to.
All right, so then let me
That
set
would
it
help
up.
you. I think it'd be easier for me if you do that. I'll cue
Okay.
you.
All right, so let me set it up.
Okay. I mean, I could try, but it might be my technical person here.
Okay.
My able technical assistant.
I have it ready to go then.
Okay, thank you.
Uh, Well, they're almost ready to go.
Well, that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, they're ready to go, but I'd have to,
That's okay.
Yeah.
I mean, because I'm not gonna, the very beginning, I have some stuff before
Okay.
it gets to the photos anyway.
okay.
Oh, Sheila's here. Okay.
Hi, Miriam.
Hi, Sherry, how are you? Good to see
Good,
you.
good.
Hi,
And
Mary.
Mazel Tov on your honor.
Thank you so much.
Yes,
I am
I'm
honored,
honored to know that you were honored.
and I'm honored to know that you are honored that I was honored.
It's very
Long time no
honorable
see,
of all
Iris.
of us.
Good afternoon.
Hello, everybody.
Hi,
Hi,
Iris.
Iris.
Actually, the birds didn't care because I got all the matzah out of the house as soon as Passover ended.
I have one
birds,
piece
I
and one
haven't-
half,
Uh-uh.
enough for a matzo brie if I want one.
Jennifer finally made one. I haven't had a matzah brie. And I don't,
I ate that every day for 8 days for breakfast.
Oh, my
Yeah.
goodness.
I have a slab with cream cheese and jelly.
I do butter.
I do too.
Well,
Like
I,
It's the only time of the year that I buy butter.
And I do put cream cheese on it also.
Yes.
And I make a really good haroset that lasts for days. So that one on, I put fruit in my, different fruits in my haroset. I
Oh,
call it my Ashkenaz Sepharad mashup. I don't cook the
I'll take
fruits,
the
but
recipe for that. I
yeah.
just finished my
I
haroset.
kind of
yes-
invented it, okay?
I just finished my haroset yesterday. I've been using it like as a side dish for chicken.
Exactly.
Very good.
Exactly.
Bertha, how are you?
Hi,
Hi.
hi, everybody.
Hi,
Good morning.
Bertha. Bertha, I'll give you a cue.
Right, I got your message.
Yeah, so when it comes up,
Very good. I
thank you.
didn't put lipstick on.
Oh, hey.
Say la vie. I put on makeup. It's the only time I ever put on makeup.
Gorgeous.
actually,
Yeah.
you usually see me in a bathrobe because when I come home from wherever I am, I take my clothes off, hang them up or whatever, and put a bathrobe on. So I had better buy more bathrobes so you don't think I only own one thing.
Well, that's like me and my jeans. My jeans could walk away without me now.
No,
I have so many pairs of jeans. One
It's
for
the only thing I fit into my jeans. God, I'm so afraid to try on anything. I know I put on the pandemic pounds.
I lost 30.
Well,
Well, a little aggravation never hurt.
a little aggravation will do that to you. A lot of aggravation will do it to you.
Well, it really wasn't as bad as I thought it would be. I mean, it's terrible.
Yeah, I understand.
But I got to the bank and it said Edna and Robert. So I had a copy of the death certificate. I gave it to them.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And the person says, well, he has to sign it.
With the death certificate, what a dope.
Oh my God.
If it wasn't so sad, I mean,
My
it's sad.
picture is
Very
never
sad.
in
I
the
mean,
thing.
we
I
know
don't
that.
know where-
But
I gotta
it's
tell you,
they're so stupid.
Ed,
He
I
has
gotta
to-
tell
I said, you have to go, I'll give you the instructions.
I put
It's
it
right on the
underneath.
expressway.
Yeah.
Right.
And his father, I don't know what Robert's father was thinking. Robert was an only child. He bought a cemetery plot over here off Liberty Avenue with 15 spots in it.
Maybe his father was buying for the whole family.
Wait a minute, Robert was an only child.
No, like other relatives.
Well, yeah, so that takes
All right, it's a
4.
little bit better.
That takes
No, because
4.
I can't see my
So now
whole
it's
face. I mean, I see
it's
everybody
my
else.
parents, Robert, everybody.
You're very
I look
close.
at
so
it.
That's why you can't
Maybe
see.
I
Back
should
up.
closer.
I
look at it
Might
and I
wanna-
realize
No,
that
I'm
they
okay now.
spelled Robert's
Oh, here it
father's
is.
Hebrew name wrong.
Okay.
Oh, here's.
No, if
They
I
go
move
and they
back,
say to
All right,
someone,
everyone.
they said, well, only you would
Hello.
notice it. I said,
All right,
money, they're gonna
everyone.
write it
yeah, but
right.
I'm not, my whole face is not.
What's this?
You look you look like a very close up, Dorothy.
No, it just, my face never is perfectly framed in the
Okay.
thing.
Oh,
Don't worry.
So we're going
where's
to
Edna?
get
Is she home or
started,
is she at her?
and I'm going to mute everyone right now. Susan,
Yes.
Fine.
did you come on as a host? I have to make you a
Okay,
host.
let me turn on the host.
Hold on, I'm gonna make you a
I can't
co-host.
back up anymore.
Okay, I'm gonna make you a co-host. All right, and I'm
I
going
just-
to mute everyone. Okay, so we can get started. Now, Susan, you have to unmute yourself.
I'm unmuted, but
Okay, good.
I
Okay.
can't see myself, so.
Hold on.
All I can see is you. I might have to go off and come on again. I know what this is. I've screwed myself up with this. Okay, now it's start my video.
Okay, are you there? We
Well,
see you. We
do
see
you
you.
see? I can't, but I'm only seeing you. And I'm not, you're just like this teeny picture. So let me, you know what? I'm gonna go off and come back.
Do you want to be a co-host? Because I could just take you
You
out
could
of
just
there.
take me out and see whether that'll work. But
Susan,
I
it's
also,
just how you have it set up.
it's how I have it set up. I know that, but I'm trying to fix it and it's not.
Go to the upper right.
Okay,
Yeah.
I just took off co-host from you.
There's nothing here for
Go
me
to
to
the
go
upper
to.
right and hit view.
I know to do that, but I'm not seeing that. All I'm seeing is you as this teeny, teeny, tiny thing. Okay. And I'm seeing schedule and Zoom schedule, and I hit something and it's just not working properly for me. So I think I'm going to go
wanna
off.
come back? Do you want to go out and come back in?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so go ahead. You do that and come back in. In the meantime,
So let's see
wanna-
if that works.
okay, I'm just going to talk through what we're going to do, which you already know. So you come back in and then.
I'm
do-
here. Okay. I can
Are
see
you there?
everybody now.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Okay, all right. So good evening, everyone. Welcome. This is our Rosh Chodesh celebration beginning yesterday and today, the month of Iyar. And as you know, our theme this year has been Eishet Chayil, and we've had some wonderful programs this year. I will mention that we have our last program on Tuesday, May 11th. And I do know that we don't have a set program yet. I have a person who came forward to say that she would co-host with someone or team with someone to do a program. But if you would like to also, work with another person and present. And, I had some ideas also about maybe instead of working with, one person, that we could talk about Eishet Chayil in another way. We could also perhaps write our own Eishet Chayil, poem and etc. But, let's hear from you so that this is, a joint effort, because a lot of people are more comfortable stepping forward as a single presenter. Some people are more comfortable working with another person, etc. Okay, so I hope to hear from one or two persons, in response to that. So we are going this evening to learn about Dr. Ruth Gruber. And Susan has done a tremendous amount of research, learning about her, and organizing many photographs that will, enlighten us and help to tell the story. And then at the end, we are going to, in addition to reading the Rosh Chodesh blessing for the month of Iyar, Miriam has volunteered to read a poem that will commemorate Yom HaZikaron, which begins tonight and tomorrow, and Hatikva for Yom HaAtzmaut. And I know, I think we're going to hear from Bertha, correct, also?
Yes. She's going to participate as well.
Okay, great. So that's going to be a very interesting story. All righty, take it away, Susan.
Okay, Sherry's going to be my assistant in helping put up photographs. The photographs you're going to see were either taken by Ruth Gruber or are photographs of Ruth Gruber taken by others. Ruth Gruber, journalist.
Let me know when you want me to start.
I will. I'll
Okay.
cue you. Don't worry, you don't have to put anything in, because I'll let you know, all right? Just listen for your cue. Ruth Gruber, journalist, photojournalist, author, and humanitarian, didn't just report history, she made history. Ruth was born on September 30th, 1911 in Brooklyn, the fourth of 5 children. Her parents were modern Orthodox Russian Jewish immigrants. The family lived in Bushwick, and Ruth attended PS 141, which then was an all-girls school. She knew at a very early age that she wanted to be a writer. She often skipped grades and was not yet 13 when she began her sophomore year at Bushwick High School. Ruth wrote that in high school, she rebelled against Brooklyn and orthodoxy. The BMT and the Williamsburg Bridge were my escape route. At age 15, Ruth began her freshman year at NYU, where she fell in love with the German language and culture and quickly became fluent in German. She attended a summer German immersion program at Mount Holyoke College. She wrote that Mount Holyoke opened an escape hatch out of Brooklyn. It was my first deliverance. I wanted more. Her second escape came in 1929 when she and her sister Betty attended a 6-week summer program at Harvard. At that time, Harvard summer programs were open to women students. Earning college credits at these summer programs, Ruth graduated NYU in 3 years at age 18. She won a postgraduate fellowship in the German department of the University of Wisconsin at Madison. It came with free tuition and a stipend of $600. She hitchhiked from New York to Madison. Rather unusual, but maybe not so in her day. In 1931, at age 19, she received her master's degree from the University of Wisconsin in German and in English. In 1931, she won a fellowship from the Institute of International Education to study at the University of Cologne in Germany. As an exchange student, she was awarded free tuition and a stipend of $1,000. In Germany, she lived with a German Jewish family. She was an eyewitness to the rise of the Nazis. Some of her classmates supported the Nazis and voiced their anti-Semitism. When she began her studies in Cologne, Ruth did not anticipate receiving a doctorate in 1 year. However, she was encouraged to do so by a professor who thought it could be possible, and he asked that she write her dissertation, which was on Virginia Woolf, in English. She couldn't find Virginia Woolf's books in a local bookstore that were in German, but decided to buy Hitler's Mein Kampf. She was reading it and marking line after anti-Semitic line. Much to the horror of her host family, she attended a Hitler rally in Cologne, wearing an American flag pin on her coat and carrying her passport in her purse. She said she tried to get as close to the platform as possible, that it was terrifying and that she could never forget his voice. What she heard, saw, and read alarmed and disturbed her. In 1932, at age 20, Ruth received her PhD from the University of Cologne in German philosophy, modern English literature, and art history, becoming the youngest person in the world to receive a doctorate. Upon her return to New York, reporters wanted to interview her. She really didn't get what the fuss was about, and she tried to escape from the press, but she did give one interview to the New York Herald Tribune, and she also had a few articles written about her accomplishment. However, finding employment was difficult. Jobs went to young men, not young women. She began speaking before small groups and on a radio program called The Voice of Brooklyn. In 1933, Ruth wrote an article about ethnic neighborhoods in Brooklyn, which the New York Times published in its Sunday edition. She was paid $25 and framed the check, posting it on her wall alongside her rejection slips. She said she never cashed that particular check. In the summer of 1934, Ruth began a part-time job working for Vilhjalmur Stephenson, the Arctic explorer. Stephenson was preparing a massive study for the U.S. War Department on the Arctic. Ruth translated documents written in German and did research, exploring his extensive library and learning about the Arctic. In 1935, at the recommendation of the Guggenheim Foundation, she was awarded the Yardley Foundation Fellowship of the New Jersey Federation Women's Club. The fellowship for travel abroad came with a stipend of $2,000, a lot of money in 1935. Ruth chose to write about women under democracy, communism, and fascism. She showed her fellowship letter to the assistant executive of the New York Herald Tribune and told him that she planned to visit England, Holland, France, Germany, and the USSR. She was asked to be the paper's special foreign correspondent while abroad and was given press credentials and was asked to cable the paper whenever she had an important story. She sent Virginia Woolf a copy of her recently published doctoral dissertation, seeking to interview her. Woolf sent a note telling Ruth to call on her when she arrived in London. However, when she arrived in London, she learned that Woolf was traveling abroad and was told to come back in October. This changed her plans as to how many countries she would be visiting, so she cut some out. In Germany, Ruth first went to Cologne, where she observed German soldiers and the SS everywhere. She saw Jews being forced into the gutter and mistreated. In Berlin, she went to the community building that was the center for 160,000 registered Jews, where she inquired about the Jewish community's ability to immigrate, to be supported, and about the status of Jewish women. While the family she had lived with in Cologne had emigrated to Amsterdam, she was told that basically for a lot of Jews in Germany, they were immobile. They had lived in Germany for hundreds of years. And those in the community who wanted to emigrate were not able to, as nobody was taking them in, that things were very bad, and that it was dangerous even for her as an American Jew to be in Germany. She was advised to get out of Germany, go home, and scream about what was happening in Germany. On the way to the Soviet Union, Ruth took a train to Warsaw, having first sent a telegram to her mother's aunt Muriel in Beremlia, the shtetl where her mother was born. Her train arrived in Warsaw at midnight, and her mother's cousin Yankel was waiting for her with his horse and cart. He told her to get in and hide under the hay, that it wasn't safe for her to be seen. They arrived at 2 a.m., and Ruth met with some 20 family members. Not present was her mother's cousin, Devorah, an ardent Zionist. Devorah had previously written to Ruth's father, who had sent her money to purchase a steamship ticket to Palestine. Ruth's great aunt told her that they had all sat shiva for Devorah when she had emigrated to Palestine. Ruth's family visit was cut short when about 4 a.m., the police knocked on the door and questioned her. They looked at her passport, inspected all of her belongings, right down to her underwear in her suitcase, her camera and typewriter, and told her to leave at once. Having come from Germany and on her way to the Soviet Union, Poland's enemies on either side, she was suspect. Her cousin Yankel drove her back to the Warsaw train station. 6 years later, only Devorah in Palestine and a brother of Devorah, who had managed to hide and later get to Palestine, were the only family members who would survive the Shoah. Her entire family and all the Jews in the town were herded to the river's edge, forced to strip naked, and were shot by the Germans. Ruth, however, did not discover this until after the war, when she saw Devorah in Palestine. Stephenson had given Ruth a letter of introduction to Professor Rudolf Samolovich, the director of the Arctic Institute in Leningrad. Samolovich, in turn, gave her a letter to Professor Otto Yulovich Schmidt in Moscow, and he was known as the Tsar of the Arctic. He controlled who went to the Arctic. Her connection with Stephenson and her letters of introduction were her passports to the Soviet Arctic. No foreigner, male or female, had been permitted to visit the Soviet Arctic. Schmidt, however, provided Ruth with letters of introduction, transportation to and in the Arctic, to and within the Arctic, and access to wireless stations to transmit her articles to the Herald Tribune. Sherry, put up number 1.
Helene, I think you disabled the share screen because it says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Okay, this is a picture of Ruth in Russia holding her Leica camera. And we can go to the next photo as well. I'll tell you about this in a minute. Ruth observed and reported upon the activities of women and men, both Russian pioneers and native people in the Arctic. In this photograph, we see Russian, actually not Russian, but native Yakuts celebrating Aviation Day at the Park of Culture and Rest in Yakutia Republic. This picture was in Russia in 1935 or 36. All right, and then we can go to the next photo. Okay. She traveled in unheated, open and closed seaplanes, such as this one, and the two people who in the forefront are her pilot and her translator, who traveled with her in Russia for this portion of her journey. And she also at one point joined the SS Anadar for a portion of its voyage. In 1935, the Anadar was the first commercial voyage in history to travel from the Pacific to the Atlantic across the top of the globe. Well, she didn't go across the top of the globe, she was on that ship. In October of 1935, Ruth met with Virginia Woolf in London. Ruth said that she viewed Woolf as a woman who lived her entire life with a will to create as a woman. Returning home, Ruth spent some 6 months in 1936 writing articles for the Sunday Herald Tribune and lecturing in the United States and Canada. In the spring of 1936, she sent her newspaper articles about the Soviet Union to Schmidt and told them she had signed a contract with Simon & Schuster to write a book about the Soviet Arctic. He invited her to return to the Arctic and to visit other places, and she did so. Again, the Herald Tribune gave her credentials as a special foreign correspondent. In Siberia and the Arctic, she interviewed ordinary men and women, as well as political bosses and political prisoners in the Gulag. Her book, I Went to the Soviet Arctic, was published on September 1st, 1939, the same day the Germans invaded Poland. Gruber continued writing for the Herald Tribune. In 1941, she interviewed Harold Ickes, the Secretary of the Interior, at his office in Washington. She was scheduled to leave a few days later for Alaska to write a series of articles for the Herald Tribune. The then territory of Alaska was under Ickes' jurisdiction, and he had read portions of her book on the Soviet Arctic. After talking for half an hour, Ickes offered Ruth a job as his field representative in Alaska. She accepted immediately. Photo number 4. You can start. Yeah. Ruth spent some 18 months traveling throughout Alaska, making a social and economic report, and she sent reports back to Ickes. This photograph is of a Eklunta woman reading Life magazine. She brought with her various magazines which would otherwise be unavailable in Alaska at that time, and featured on the cover, that's Ted Williams, the baseball player. And this is taken in Hooper Bay, Alaska. And we're going to look at some more photos that she took in Alaska. So there's a dog. She travels by sled dog, I believe, at some point also. She went to various islands. She went things on the mainland. She had to fly from place to place. She took other means of transportation as well. The next, Sherry. This is a picture of fish drying in wax in the Bethel fishing village, and a little boy there. And we can go on to the next. These are children on in the U.S. Indian Service, school children, Native children on a bus. And is the next one still the Alaska? Yes. Okay, now this woman you may see on her hands with that's doesn't have her top on. You can see further down on her hand and wrist. She's a Native woman, and she has tattoos on her face and on her wrist, which were done to enhance her beauty. And this is in the St. Lawrence Island in Alaska. Ruth took some of the earliest known color photographs of the Alaskan territory in the early 1940s. By 2011, her original slides had faded, but a master printer at the International Center for Photography had painstakingly color corrected them and created prints. And it's the very beautiful photographs. And okay, so upon her return to DC, Ickes made Ruth his special assistant, and she worked for him for a total of 5 years. In July of 1944, President Roosevelt announced that he would bring 1,000 refugees from Europe to America. This was the only attempt by the U.S. to shelter Jewish refugees during the war. The Army was in charge of selecting where they would stay, and they selected a former Army camp in Oswego, New York, and they would be housed and confined there. As they were the president's guests, they did not have visas and could not travel freely, even if they had relatives in America, which many of them did. Before leaving Europe, the refugees had to sign a statement that they would return to Europe at the end of the war. Next photo. Ickes selected Ruth to fly to Europe on a secret mission to escort the refugees. She spoke Yiddish and German, and he felt that the refugees would trust her. She later wrote that she told Ickes that this is the most important assignment of my life. She was made a simulated general, so that if the military plane she was traveling in was shot down and she was captured by the Nazis, she would be treated as a POW and not a civilian who could be killed as a spy. As you see, she's wearing an army uniform. Next photo. Sherry, the next can come up. Yeah, okay. The refugees came from the Balkans and Central Europe, and they had made their way to Italy. In Naples, 982 refugees boarded the Henry Gibbons. The others had dropped out for various reasons, and it was too late to interview and bring the number up to 1,000. 89% of these people were Jewish. The rest were Catholic, Protestant, and Greek Orthodox. Also on board the Henry Gibbons were 1,000 American soldiers who had been injured and were being sent home. This ship was part of a convoy of 29 ships, carrying home wounded soldiers and cargo, and included 16 warships. Sherry, the next. During the voyage, these are men who are refugees on the Henry Gibbons. During the voyage, Ruth quickly developed a rapport with the refugees and sought to take down their stories. The men told her, "It was too obscene and you're a young woman." But she told them, "Forget, if you can, that I'm a woman. You are the first witnesses coming to America. Through you, America will learn the truth about Hitler's crimes." They began to talk, and she took down their stories. She also had the gifted singers and actors among the refugees perform for the wounded soldiers, enabling them to see these Jews as people who had suffered terribly. With this assignment, Ruth recognized that her life would be forever bound up with rescue and survival. As she later wrote, using my words and images, my typewriter and my camera as tools. I had to live the story to write it, and not only live it. If it was the story of injustice, I had to fight it. Sherry, you could bring up the next one. This voyage took 13 days. They landed in New York, and Ruth accompanied the refugees to Oswego. In this photograph, you could see this is a group of people, family members. They would be registering. They'd give their name, where, and just how many people were in their family. It was pretty benign. And you see the lady in the front holding the child who has a tag. And the adults were given tags. And on their tags, it was printed the words, casual baggage. Gruber spent a month in Oswego, assisting the refugees and advocating on their behalf. 2 days after Yom Kippur, Ruth escorted Eleanor Roosevelt and Eleanor Morgenthau on their visit to Oswego. Mrs. Roosevelt spoke with each person she met, went into their sparse living accommodations, and was entertained by some of the refugees. That night, Mrs. Roosevelt wrote with sympathy about the refugees in her newspaper column. She was also instrumental in arranging for transportation so that some of the older teens were able to attend the local college, which they had otherwise would have no transportation to get to. The school-age children attended school in Oswego. In December of 1944, the New York Post ran a profile on Gruber, and she also spoke on a radio show about the refugees. While the government was debating the fate of the Oswego refugees, Gruber lobbied to keep them in America. In December of 1945, President Truman announced that they could stay, as many of them had relatives here, and there was no sense in sending them back and having their relatives sponsor them. They were given visas, driven by bus to Canada, and legally crossed over the Rainbow Bridge into New York. The next photo. Okay, at this point, I'm going to ask Bertha to tell us about this photo and her unique relationship with Ruth Gruber.
And I can blow it up if you need.
Yeah.
Mute myself. Okay. So this was very interesting that I found this picture. It was in Vanity Fair, and I never read the magazine Vanity Fair. I happened to get it because at the time I was on the National Board of Hadassah, and they sent briefings to the presidents. And among the pictures, among the briefings was that picture. And I looked and I couldn't believe it. It was, I don't know if you can, this is me and this is my brother. This is me.
Better?
And that's my brother. And interestingly enough, the caption on the picture actually says, Mother Courage, Ruth Gruber sent her in her war correspondence uniform, escorts Jewish orphans to the United States on the SS Uruguay, May 1946. Ruth Gruber, and interestingly enough, the whole article where this picture appeared had to do with the miniseries that was on television or going to be on television, The Haven, which had to do with the refugees from going to Oswego. I don't know how that picture and the fact that this was the SS Uruguay ever came, but as I said, the whole article had to do with the refugees on the and the miniseries Haven going to Oswego. But nevertheless, when I saw that picture, I wrote to Vanity Fair telling them I was so surprised to see that, and that and they printed the letter that I sent them, and that I didn't know that Ruth Gruber was, I mean, you know, I was a kid. And I didn't know who Ruth Gruber was and that she was on that ship and so on. After that, I don't remember, I think Ruth Gruber called me And she was such an unusual, down-to-earth person with all her background and everything. And we talked and everything. And after that, she actually appeared, spoke several times at Hillcrest through the Adult Education Committee, and also at Hadassah. And one of the times with Ellen Miller, we picked her up to bring her to Hillcrest. And she asked me all kinds of questions. How am I doing? What am I doing? What did I do when I came here? What education? You know, she was so interested and asked me all kinds of questions. And we had such a nice conversation. And after that, I don't know whether it was then or what, I bought, I'm sure a lot of you have the book Ahead of Time about her. And she autographed that to me, to Bertha, whom I brought to America aboard the SS Uruguay in May 1946 from her friend Ruth Gruber. And as I said, it was such a surprise. And with all her background and everything, she was so down to earth, and we had such nice conversations, and it was just wonderful. And there I am. And there I am now.
Thank you, Bertha. Yeah, this photograph is in the U.S. National Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington. They have it in their collection. And recently, like last month, they had, I'm a member and I get emails from them. They had an email having to do with women heroes during World War II, and they had various little stories. And for each story, they had a photograph, and then you could click on it and go to the website, and each story would be told. This photograph was on the story that they had about Ruth Gruber. And that's why I sent it to you. And, you know, I don't know, so you told me you were interested and that you had met her, and, you know, and I sent this to, you sent me the photograph from Vanity Fair, and I sent this one back to you to show you that,
you did.
yeah, that it was in the Holocaust in the museum in Washington as well.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I didn't know that. The interesting thing is that when we arrived in the United States, there were reporters there, and there was a very long article in the New York Herald Tribune about my brother and me. I don't know if you can see this. I don't know. Anyway,
Yeah.
With 3 other children, and the headline was 2 orphans sought 4 years in on the SS Uruguay. And I don't know whether that had anything to do the fact that Ruth Gruber, you know, was a reporter for the Herald Tribune.
I would think probably, yes, that it appeared there, yeah. Okay, so thank you. And to continue, in January of 1946, the New York Post asked Ruth to take a leave of absence from her government job and cover the newly formed Anglo-American Committee on Palestine. Truman had asked the British to open up Palestine to 100,000 refugees that were held in displaced persons camps in Europe. The British needed American aid and could not say no outright to Truman, but suggested a committee of 6 Americans and 6 British representatives who would travel to the displaced persons camps in Germany and Austria, meet with Jewish and Arab leaders, hold sessions in Palestine and parts of the Arab world. And if the committee voted unanimously, the British would let in 100,000 refugees to Palestine. This was the 19th committee to meet on Palestine. Truman appointed 6 American men he hoped would open up Palestine to the refugees, while Prime Minister Ernest Bevin appointed 6 British men who he hoped would not open up Palestine to any refugees. Can you go to the next photo?
I'm looking, oh, there it is. Okay.
Next one.
Moving it up. Okay.
Okay, can you blow that up?
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
There.
Okay, this is Ruth's identification card from the War Department as a correspondent for New York Post, and it says January 31st, 1946 on it. Ickes granted her a leave of absence and told her to write a resignation letter, which would become effective when he resigned. Gruber first traveled to London, where, as a correspondent, she had to be outfitted in an American military uniform, as reporters assigned to the committee were not permitted to walk around in civilian clothing. The committee conducted a week of meetings in London and then split into 4 subcommittees that would cover different areas in Europe before meeting up again in Vienna. Ruth and Gerald Frank of the Overseas News Agency were the only journalists attached to these subcommittees. And as the British weren't really interested in having the public knowing what was going on, they had a blackout of the British press while they were in London. But Ruth and Gerald Frank acted as liaisons between the committee and reporters who were in other parts of Europe that they traveled to. Ruth traveled with the subcommittee to Paris, and they took a train to the American zone in Frankfurt. She went with the subcommittee members to the Zalsheim displaced persons camp. You put up the next photo. Sherry?
I'm sorry.
Sorry, next photo.
Yes, one second. I have to make this smaller.
Yeah.
And then I can get to the
Yeah.
row. Hold on.
Okay. This is a photo taken at one of the displaced persons camp. As you see, there's the Israeli flag and the sign that says, "We all want Palestine as our country." When they got to Zalsheim, they saw a banner with the words, "We want to go, we have to go, we will go to Palestine." And then another banner, "We Jewish children will no more stay on this bloody ground where our parents were destroyed. We will go home to Palestine." They interviewed over 18,000 people were interviewed, and the vast majority, over 17,000 of them, said they wanted to go to, when asked like what was their first choice of country to go to, the answer was Palestine. And for some, the second choice was the crematorium. It was Palestine or nothing. At Zalsheim, Ruth and the committee saw 3,000 men, women, and children standing outside the administration building in a driving rain, singing Hatikva. Each day in Germany brought new revelations. Gruber, along with the committee members, learned about the gas chambers and were among the first to see them, and about how many children had died. She later wrote that even living in Washington during the war years, she knew little more than most Americans and was shocked by the extent of what she was learning. She, along with the committee members, spent a day at the Nuremberg trials, where they viewed a film about the concentration camps it was actually not about, but of the concentration camps that had been taken by Allied troops. From Nuremberg, they went to Prague, where Ruth learned that Ickes had resigned, making her resignation official as well. The entire committee met up in Vienna, and they all went on to Egypt, Iraq, and to Palestine. In the end, with a lot of some arm twisting, the committee unanimously recommended that the British allow 100,000 displaced persons into Palestine, but Bevan rejected the finding. When she returned to New York, Gruber began writing articles for the New York Post that she said she could not have written in Jerusalem without endangering her sources. No longer a government employee, as she put it, the gloves came off. She wrote a series of 4 articles in which she sought to capture what life was like in Palestine in 1946. It was fiercely critical of British policies. She wrote, "The fierce hatred of the British, the concentration camp atmosphere, the destruction of civil liberties, the growth of a people's army, the same social and political explosives which made Ireland the tinderbox of the last post-war period, make Palestine the time bomb of this one." The first article had a banner headline on the front page of the Post. and ads were plastered along the sides of every bus in New York reading, "Palestine today is Ireland of 1921, as Black and tan terror rules." The next headline was, how Britain recruited pro-Nazis and spent $20 million on jails. David Ben-Gurion was in Paris on June 29, 1946, which enabled him to escape a massive British dragnet. The British soldiers and police had locked up all the Jewish leaders in Palestine at the Latron Fortress jail. Thousands of others were arrested. Only Golda Meir was free to keep the shadow government running. When Ben-Gurion arrived in New York, Gruber suggested to Ed Flynn, who was the editor of the New York Post, that she write what was called a post close-up. Her interview with Ben-Gurion, who was not well known here, introduced the leader of the Jews in Palestine to America. The United Nations then appointed a special committee on Palestine. Gruber was now again a reporter for the Herald Tribune, and she accompanied this committee and traveled again to the displaced person camps in Germany and Vienna, and to the Arab world and to Palestine. On July 18th, 1947, while listening to testimony at the YMCA in Jerusalem, Gruber learned that a ship called Exodus 1947, bringing 4,554 survivors to Palestine, had been attacked by British destroyers. Sherry, the next photo. Gruber cabled the Herald Tribune, telling them anybody could cover the testimony, and she took a taxi to Haifa to cover the story of the Exodus. There she found the ship built to hold a few hundred people with a large hole in its side, a crumpled deck, and lifeboats dangling off its side. Unarmed, it had been attacked by the British, killing an American who refused to give up the wheelhouse, and 2 immigrant teenagers, one of whom had thrown an orange at a soldier. Gruber described the Exodus as a matchbox that has been splintered by a nutcracker. And this is the photo that she took of the Exodus ship at port in Haifa. Next photo. The wounded were removed first, stripped of their bandages to make sure that they were not faking an injury in order to stay in Palestine. In this photo, you could see a wounded man being supported on one side by a British soldier. The rest of the passengers were separated by sex, forced to leave their meager belongings behind, sprayed with DDT, and without regard to family units, forced onto 3 so-called hospital ships that would supposedly take them to Cyprus prison camps. Next photo, Sherry. As you see, these piles of belongings that they had to leave behind. They never got them. They never were transported with them. We'll go on to the next photo. These are people awaiting transit to the prison camps in Cyprus. And then the next one. And then this is taken in Cyprus. Ruth flew to Cyprus. The 3 ships never arrived. Approximately 52,000 survivors were imprisoned in Cyprus in the years following the war. Ruth wrote that Cyprus was, quote, a hot hellhole of desert sand wind, of tents and Quonset huts, with a long road hemmed in by 2 walls of barbed wire fences and a wooden watchtower guarding the whole camp. The architecture had come straight out of Auschwitz. She said there was no privacy, water, or sanitation, and, quote, you had to smell Cyprus to believe it. This man who's putting his baby to sleep in a bassinet that's made of rags and scraps of wood. She flew back to Jerusalem, rejoined the UN committee, and flew with them to Germany and Austria. In Geneva, the committee voted to partition Palestine into a Jewish and Arab state. While the committee was writing its report, Gruber flew to Paris and then to Marseille, where she took a taxi to Port de Bouc. This is where the British had sent the 3 ships carrying the passengers of the Exodus 1947. The American crew members came off the ships, but the survivors in all 3 ships refused to disembark. The British tried different tactics. One was not to give them, they told the French, well, there's really not enough food and water for more than a day or so on all of these 3 ships. However, the French weren't buying that, and the French and Americans sent food and water to the ships every day. The British did not permit the many journalists who were covering the story to board the ships. The south of France was experiencing a heat wave. It was over 100 degrees. After 18 days in sweltering heat, the British decided to send the 3 ships to Germany. Finally, they permitted 3 reporters, 1 per ship, to board the prison ships. Next page. Next photo, please. Thank you. Ruth was selected as a pool reporter and was the only one with a camera. On board the Runnymede Park, she took photographs and interviewed the survivors. Men, women, children, and newborns were crowded into the sweltering hull, as in this picture here, and the next photo as well. When she took these photographs, she had no idea where they would come out because it was so dark. When the people on the ship realized that Ruth was Jewish and American, they asked her to tell their stories, and they gave her slips of paper telling her to call their relatives in America. When she got off the ship, the British consul demanded that she turn her camera over to him. Let's go to the next photo also, and make it larger if you can. Okay, now 2 things you're going to notice here. There's like a sort of cage-like structure and barbed wire, and when they let the prisoners, shall we call them, the Jews, on top, that's where they would confine them to these areas, and they had a couple of outhouses. And in protest, they took a Union Jack, a British flag, and painted a swastika on it. So she gets off the ship with her camera, and the consul demanded that she turn the camera over to him. Gruber told him it was impossible. It was the property of the Herald Tribune. He demanded the camera and film in front of the entire press corps. She refused. He told her to hand them over, or the British government would bring charges against her and the Herald Tribune, telling her, "Your career is at stake. I warn you, both you and the Herald Tribune are in serious trouble." Gruber stood her ground, telling him, "You'll have to get the British government to talk to my editor." She then walked away, took a cab to her hotel in Marseille, wrote her story of the scenes in the prison ship, and called Paris to immediately send the story to New York. She then spoke to the editor of the Paris Herald Tribune, who told her to fly to Paris with her films. The next day in Paris, her photos were developed and printed. The Herald Tribune had a worldwide exclusive, but they first needed to decide what were the British up to. Gruber flew to London, and she met with Charles Campbell, who she knew when she worked in DC. Campbell was now a top official in the information section of the Foreign Office. She told him that the British consul had accused her of smuggling her Rolleiflex aboard, when in fact he was sitting next to her in the launch and the camera was banging him in the leg on the way to the Runnymede Park. Campbell laughed it off. He felt these consuls, they think they're the authority for everything. And she called the editor in Paris, who decided that although the photos belonged to the Herald Tribune, they would give them to the world. Ruth's photos were turned over to the Associated Press, and within seconds were sent to thousands of newspapers and magazines. Her photo of the swastika painted on the Union Jack became Life magazine's photo of the week and the most famous photograph she ever took. Ruth's photos radically changed attitudes towards the plight of Jewish refugees and Holocaust survivors. Ruth originally wrote on a 128-page manuscript about the Exodus for the New Yorker magazine that was edited by William Shawn, who became a very famous editor of the magazine. Shawn told her that Ralph Fleischman, the magazine's Jewish owner, had read it and rejected it as too Jewish. Shawn, however, called his friend Bruce Blyven at the New York Republic, who said he would publish it sight unseen. Ruth's story of the Exodus ran in 3 consecutive issues of the New Republic. In 1948, Gruber assembled her dispatches and 30 of her photos into a book, Destination Palestine, the story of the Haganah ship Exodus 1947. It has been republished as Exodus 1947, the ship that launched a nation. And if you're interested, you could get it from the Queen's Public Library, along with other books she wrote. In December 1948, Gruber was invited by Luis Muñoz Marin to attend his inauguration as the first elected governor in the 450-year history of Puerto Rico. She had met Marin when she worked in D.C. While in Puerto Rico at an inaugural event, Marin introduced her to Philip Michaels, a lawyer and vice president of Saks Quality Stores. Michaels also worked as a community organizer with Puerto Rican youths in the Bronx. Ruth later wrote that, well, the Herald Tribune asked her to cover the story, and she later wrote that, yes, it was historic. It was a historic story, but she didn't know that it was also going to be of personal historic impact on her. In 1949, Ruth returned to Israel to cover a secret operation called Magic Carpet, the airlifting of Yemenite Jews from Aden, then a British protectorate, to Israel. After the Yemenite Jews had safely landed in Israel, Gruber was free to publish her photos and write about this experience. In 1951, Ruth, at the age of 39, married Philip Michaels, who she had met in Puerto Rico. In 1952, at the age of 41, she gave birth to her daughter Celia, and in 1954, her son David was born. She continued to work as a foreign correspondent for the Herald Tribune, covering every wave of immigration to Israel until the paper closed in 1966. She wrote a regular column for Hadassah magazine called Diary of an American Housewife and traveled to Israel every year. She also wrote for Life magazine and published 2 books about Puerto Rico. Can you show the next 2 photos? Okay, this is a photo that she took in 1952 that was in Haifa. And these are, these are Romanian Jews who were reunited in Haifa. And on the next picture also, these also are Romanian Jews in Haifa who were reunited after the Holocaust in Israel. And the next photo, Sherry, this photo she took in Casablanca in Morocco, and it was of Jewish children in a school. So, you know, obviously she's traveling to Israel and other Jewish communities at this point, and that was in 1950. I think also in 1952. Ruth's husband Philip died in 1968. In 1974, she married Henry Rosner, who was then the New York City Deputy Commissioner of Human Resources. In that year, she published a book called They Came to Stay in collaboration with former Congresswoman Marjorie Margulies Mezvinsky, who had adopted 2 Asian babies. Gruber and her daughter had traveled to Vietnam during the war and also to Korea to do research for this book. In 1978, Ruth and her husband, Henry, lived in Israel for nearly a year while she wrote Rachela, A Woman of Israel, a book about an Israeli nurse, Rachela Priwes, a ninth-generation Jerusalemite who worked in a British detention camp and in a hospital in Beersheba. This book won the National Book Award in 1979 for the best book on Israel. And the proceeds from this book enabled her to write Haven, the Unknown Story of 1,000 World War II Refugees, which was published in 1983. Her story, this story became the basis of a permanent Holocaust exhibit at the State Museum in Albany called From Holocaust to Haven. And as Bertha had mentioned, it was also the basis of a TV miniseries called Haven, starring 5'9" Natasha Richardson as 5'2" Ruth Gruber, and Anne Bancroft as Ruth's mother. Bancroft had an Emmy nomination for her role. In 2002, Gruber helped dedicate the Safe Haven Museum in Oswego, New York, and the library there is called the Dr. Ruth Gruber Library and Resource Center. In 1985, at the age of 74, Ruth visited isolated Jewish villages in Ethiopia. Sherry? She described the airlift of Ethiopian Jews to Israel in her book, Rescue, the Exodus of the Ethiopian Jews. This is a photograph that was taken in a synagogue in Ethiopia where the Jews sought refuge during the civil war there. And this was in 1985, and it's in Ambaba, Ethiopia. And in the next photograph, this is an Ethiopian Jewish woman showing a photograph of her children who had already emigrated to Israel, and this was taken in 1985. Ruth was a dynamic speaker. She never used notes. Unlike me, I'm using plenty of notes. She raised funds for Israel on par with that of Golda Meir. She was a frequent speaker for Hadassah. Once at a Hadassah program, she and Leon Uris, the author of the novel Exodus, were asked to speak about their books. Uris told the audience that after he sold the movie rights to his book to producer and director Otto Preminger, Preminger asked him to send him 2 or 3 books that most influenced him. Uris sent Preminger Ruth's book on the Exodus. The next morning, Preminger called him and said, "Leon, if I had read this book first, I would never have bought yours." Before the 1960 premiere of the movie Exodus, the Israeli consul in New York gave a party at which Ruth, Preminger, and some of the actors were present. Ruth asked Preminger if Uris's story was true. Preminger told her yes. And then he said to her, "You know what I'm going to do for you?" She wondered, is he going to give me a movie credit? He gave her 2 passes to the movie's premiere. In February 2002, I met Ruth Gruber when she spoke at Queens College, and I bought her books Haven and Ahead of Time, which she inscribed to me. I also have a signed copy of a paperback edition of her book, Rachela, Woman of Israel. Now, she was very active in her later years. She spoke, she was still writing, and she was asked about this, and she said, "Never, never retire and write from your heart and your soul." Among the many awards she received were the Na'amat Golda Meir Human Rights Award. In 1988, she received a Lifetime Achievement Award from the American Society of Journalists and Authors. At age 100, in 2011, Ruth was honored with the International Center of Photography's Cornell Kappa Lifetime Achievement Infinity Award, a retrospective of exhibition of her work as a photojournalist was presented at the ICP in 2011. And her photographs have been exhibited in many places around the country. Ruth gave hundreds of her negatives to the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum in Washington, D.C. And photographs that she had taken are also in that museum's permanent collection. After she died, her papers were given to NYU. Ruth said, "Dream dreams, have visions, but let no obstacle stop you," which pretty much sums up her life. She died at her home in Manhattan on November 17th, 2016, at age 105. She was, I believe, a true woman of valor. Thank you very much for listening.
You want to show these pictures?
Yes, let me show you that. This is, you wonder how she wrote all these things, you know, many years afterwards. Well, she kept hundreds of she had contemporaneous writings, but she kept hundreds of notebooks. And this is her in her apartment in Manhattan. And as you can see, there's a lot of materials in front of her. And those notebooks enabled her to recreate conversations and observations that she wrote about decades later. And the last photograph I'm going to show you here, Ruth as a much older lady with her French manicure, because she always dressed well, and her camera. Thank you. Thanks you, Sherry.
You're welcome.
And if anybody has anything they want to ask, maybe I can answer.
Thank you, Susan. Let's give Susan a round of applause because that was really, really very good and a lot of work we can see went into your presentation. Anyone have any questions for Susan?
Yes. Why did Bevan reject the Jewish people?
Why? Because the British were not particularly interested in opening up Palestine to the Jews. You know, Truman had said later, much later, well, it was a three-letter word. It was OIL.
Yes. Okay. Thank you.
And I'm just going to tell you something a little bit about, Ruth's children. You know, when you talk about like, do your children follow in what you do? Her daughter was she worked for CBS for 10 years, and she was the sole video editor during the Gulf War, and I believe she worked in Lebanon at the time. And her son, he went to CCNY for his undergraduate degree, and then he's an epidemiologist. He's on the faculty at George Washington University, and he's had leaves of absences because he worked in the Clinton administration, and then he also worked in the Obama administration, and he was let's see if I can find it. He in the Clinton administration, he was the Assistant Secretary of Energy for Environment, Safety, and Health, and was approved by the Senate for that. And in the Obama administration, also approved by the Senate, he was the Assistant Secretary of Labor for Occupation, Safety, and Health from 2009 through January of 2017. And he has been recently named as a member of the Biden-Harris COVID-19 Advisory Board. So her children in their own right are accomplished. And her niece, you may have heard of, is Davis Sobel. She writes nonfiction on science. She wrote a book called Galileo's Daughter quite a number of years ago, and probably, was very well received book. And so writing is in her family in various levels and various ways.
Okay.
Iris, do you have a question?
I do. You say that she graduated college at 18, and then she got her master's degree at 21.
19 when she got her master's.
Oh, 19. Okay.
19, and then she was 20 when she got her doctorate.
Wow.
Yeah, I know that. I mean, she did her master's in 2 subjects and her doctorate while she wrote her dissertation on Virginia Woolf. She had orals in 3 subjects. You know, so this woman was like a fabulous student and a very, you know, unusual in that sense. And so, you know, a real intellect. And you know, she never viewed herself as a woman writer, a woman, you know, reporter. She was a reporter. And I think she was very much taken seriously by her colleagues. I didn't include in this, but one of the things also as a first with other reporters, when Jordan became from Transjordan to the kingdom, Hashemite kingdom of Jordan, she was in Israel. And a bunch of them got in a car and they drove to Jordan and they took photos and they were like, welcome to show that here they are in the first, you know, press recognizing this new formed state of Jordan. So she did a lot of firsts, and she was, and in Israel, particularly in the early years, she, you know, she met like who's who. She knew everybody. And it wasn't just that she knew them in the beginning, and maybe because she's a young Jewish woman, and maybe there weren't probably not a lot of Jewish reporters like Moshe Sharet. We'd come to the press office and talk to her, and somebody'd say, "Oh, you got a scoop on something?" She said, "No, he invited me to dinner with his wife and family." So she had these relationships with all these people, and she had a really remarkable life.
Truly,
Great
truly.
job, Susan. You did a
Thank
great
you.
Great.
Yes. Okay, and I, you know, I'm looking at the full screen, and I hadn't looked at the full screen before, and I see some faces who I have not seen before. So welcome. This is
I did invite some people. So.
yes. So welcome, because I see either I figured they were either your friends or interested participants in our program. So that's very nice. So we're going to close our program now. Miriam, are you still here?
I'm here. Oops, I'm muted.
Okay. Do I see you, Miriam?
I'm next to you on the screen, on my screen anyway.
Oh, yes. Okay. So since tonight and tomorrow, tonight begins Yom HaZikaron, and then Thursday we have Yom HaAtzmaut. Miriam is going to share 2 poems, and then we will say the blessing for Rosh Chodesh Iyar. Miriam?
Okay. I think I'm unmuted. Okay,
Yes.
Just Yom HaZikaron is Israel's Memorial Day, and Yom HaAtzmaut is Israel's Independence Day, and it's not a coincidence that one follows on the other. And the poem that I'm going to read is actually a poem that is read at most Yom HaZikaron ceremonies across Israel, and it has also been put to music. I just discovered some interesting background music, information about it that I'll share with you before I read it. When the UN voted for the partition of Palestine on November 29th, 1947, many skeptics and non-believers in Zionism around the world claimed that the state of Israel was handed over to the Jews on a silver platter. Chaim Weizmann, who would become Israel's first president, gave the following quote to the Haaretz newspaper on December 15th, 1947. He said in Hebrew, "Ein medina nitenet la'am al magash shel kesef." A nation is not given, a state is not given over to its people on a silver platter. And the poem called Magash HaKesef, the Silver Platter by Natan Alterman, was published in a Hebrew newspaper 4 days after Weizmann's statement. During the War of Independence, in which Israel lost 1% of its total population, the poem became a rallying cry. And in many ways, its message still holds true today, because Israel was built and lives on because of the sacrifices of real people every day. So this is the poem, The Silver Platter, Magash HaKesef. I got this from the Hartman Institute website. I chose it from 3 different translations, and the translator was not identified. I just liked this one better than the other 2. So the land grows still, red fades in the sky, over smoking frontiers in Israel. Heartsick but breathing, the people greet the wonder that has no parallel. Beneath the moon, they stand and wait, facing the dawn in awe and joy. Then, slowly towards the waiting throng, 2 step forth, a girl and a boy, clad for work and for war, heavy shod and still. Up the winding path they make their way, their clothes unchanged, still soiled with the grime of the battle-filled night and the toilsome day, weary past telling, strangers to sleep, but wearing their youth like dew in their hair. Dumb they approach. Are they living or dead? Who knows as they stand unmoving there? Tear-stained, wondering, people ask, who are you? Softly reply the 2, we are the silver platter on which the Jewish state is handed you. In shadow, they fall when their tale is told. The rest, let Israel's story unfold. Very powerful, moving, and still very, very meaningful and relevant poem. We sing Hatikva on occasions of joy, occasions of sorrow, occasions of celebration. I don't know how often we think about what it means. It's something that for many of us, or most of us, is just internalized and it's in our blood. And it was just interesting to look at the words again and to look at the translation. So I'll read it first in the Hebrew and then I'll translate it into English. Kol od belevav pnima, nefesh Yehudi homia, ulfate mizrach kadima, ayin l'tzion Sophia. Od lo abda tikvatenu, hatikva bat shnot alpayim, liot am chofshi ba'atzenu, Eretz Tzion, v'Yerushalayim. And here's a translation of it. As long as the heart within the Jewish soul yearns, and towards the eastern edges, onward, an eye gazes toward Zion. Our hope is not yet lost, the hope that is 2,000 years old, to be a free nation in our land, the land of Zion, Jerusalem. So let us recall in memory, in loving memory, the tens of thousands of Israeli soldiers who keep the dream alive and fortify and support and sustain Israel every day, as they have done for 73 years, and may they do so forever. And let us say, Chag Sameach, to celebrate Yom HaAtzmaut on Israel's 73rd year of independence.
Thank
If we
you.
all had our wine, we'd raise our cups to say L'chaim.
Thank you, Miriam.
You're welcome.
And I'm going to read the blessing for the month. May the month of Iyar be a month of blessings, blessings of goodness, blessings of joy, peace and kindness, friendship and love, creativity, strength, serenity, fulfilling work and dignity, satisfaction, success and sustenance, physical health and radiance. May truth and justice guide our acts and compassion temper our lives, that we may blossom as we age and become our sweetest selves. May it be so. Amen.
Amen.
And let us wish everyone a wonderful Rosh Chodesh Iyar. Have a wonderful month. As I said, our next, and anyone here tonight, please, if you are interested in joining us again, either send your email to me or through Susan, and I'm more than happy to send you the email as I send it out. And so Tuesday, May 11th is our next program. And again, if you have an interest in working with someone to present, or if you have some ideas about how we could wrap up our work for our theme this year of Eishet Chayil, please get back to me. Okay? And everyone, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining. Have a great week and have a great, I hope to see everyone and be well. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you,
Susan.
Susan. Thank you,
And
Mary.
okay, I just have
Good night.
one more thing
Thank
I'd
you,
like to say,
Susan.
'cause I don't know whether I said this part about it, that she said, Ruth, dream dreams, have visions, but
Yeah.
let no obstacle stop you. And I think that's something we could all take to heart.
She was a true Eishet Chayil.
Yes,
Very good choice, Susan. Wonderful choice.
thanks.
Thanks.
Wonderful.
Thank you. Very good.
Thank you.
That was terrific, Susan.
Terrific.
Very nice.
And
Thanks.
Bertha, thank you. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for
Thank you.
participating.
Good night, everybody.
Thank you,
And
Good night.
Bertha,
Terry,
so
thank
much.
you also
Good
for
night.
pitching in.
Well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
Right.
be well, everyone. Bye-bye.
Good night, bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye,
Bye.
everyone. Good night.
Right.